How you doing, everybody? Day 5 of the virtual retreat. We're here in sunny Thailand, and today we're talking about patterns. More importantly, how to become aware of patterns and how to break patterns so that you can either create new patterns in your life or let go and just be free of old habits, addictions or behaviors which are either driving you insane or that you really want to let go of, just so you can feel more happiness and joy in your life. So we've all just had a nice little meditation. Most people are a bit zenned out. Everyone's just smiling at me, which is great. And we're going to do an exercise in this video. In this class today, we're going to do an exercise and we're going to focus on 3 key areas. I'm going to talk to everybody else now. I'm not just ignoring you guys. So we're going to focus on 3 key areas on our patterns. The first one is psychological patterns. The second one is emotional patterns, and the third one is life patterns. So what I'd like you to do, if you're listening at home as well, grab a pen and paper and just make 3 columns on a blank sheet of paper and write down 3 headings: psychological, emotional and life. Or you can just write thoughts, feelings and life. So it's going to be thoughts, feelings and life. 3 columns. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at these patterns in different areas of our lives. And like I said this morning, I'm going to share again with everybody listening at home, the greatest thing about being a human being is that we are able to create patterns and forget about them. So you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you haven't got to think about it. You get in the car, you drive the same route to work over and over again, and then you forget about it. And a great teacher kind of taught me, it's like the grooves in a record. Once those grooves in a record have been etched, you just put the needle on and then the record goes round and round and round and it stays in that pattern. Which is great, because if we had to think about all the things that we do, like brushing our teeth every day, getting up, going to work, getting dressed, making the coffee, whatever it is we're doing, our brain would literally fry. There's too much information for the brain to be able to cope with that. I can't remember how much it is. It's something like 1 million or 11. I can't remember. It's ridiculous. The number is crazy. The pieces of information that are going into your brain right now through your senses, through all these different chemical reactions. And so the brain isn't actually going, oh, that's that sound, that's that smell, that's that color, that's this pattern. I need to move my left arm. I need to move my fingers right now. I've got to open up my voice just so I can start speaking. Basically, everything is in patterns which are etched inside at a subconscious level, or you can say at a spiritual level. It's in your DNA. And so that's amazing. It's really, really great. But also, one of the dumbest things about being a human being is that we can get caught in these patterns. So the brain is amazing. It does us a favor. It makes life a lot easier. But then we can get caught in emotional patterns that we hold on for years. We can get caught in these psychological patterns, which are your thoughts, like negative thinking, which we repeat year after year after year, day after day. You know, sometimes I hear the same story from people, and they've been saying the same thing for 5 or 10 years. They're either going to do something new and change their life, or they're still talking about their pain and their misery. And I look sometimes, as much love and compassion I try to have, and I'm like, just literally change the record. You know, and so going back to that record, what happens is when the pattern's going round and round, it's stuck in there. And sometimes we need to scratch the record. Sometimes we need to come out of that groove and create another one, create another tune. Because if that pattern, if that record isn't serving you a purpose and you don't change it, you don't become aware of it, you don't break it, you don't create new patterns, then you will repeat it no matter what for the rest of your life. And I had the great privilege of working with some amazing, beautiful people in a homeless shelter, addicts that were completely lost, that had been traumatized at a very young age. And I used to see people in their 60s and their 70s, and they were still, subconsciously and emotionally, still stuck on the patterns and the traumas that had happened to them when they were like 6 or 7. And it just seems so hard for them to break those cycles. And I know most of us guys are not going through that, but everybody's going through something in life. Everybody's got a pattern or a habit or a behavior which they would rather not have if they're aware of it, or something that's just kind of holding them back. And like I said, it can be a thought inside the head. I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, I never stick at anything, I'm not great at yoga, whatever it is. Or it can be an emotional one. I feel lonely, I feel sad, I feel depressed. And we just hold on to these stories. And then the life patterns. And like I said earlier to everybody listening, sometimes we just repeat the same old patterns over and over again, and we can meet the same person. Like I said, the example I gave earlier was in a relationship. You meet the same person year after year, or different years, and you kind of, I know it's a destructive relationship, it's a negative relationship. Maybe the guy cheats on you all the time, or maybe the woman is insecure, whatever it is. And most people will blame the other person. You know, she's too insecure. Or the woman will go, oh, he's a bastard, he's always cheating on me, he's always womanizing. And then they'll meet the same person like 3 years later, and then they'll do it again. And they never stop and go, wow, that's inside me. I'm attracting that person, I'm creating that person. So I suppose what we're doing in this session today, on day 5, is taking full responsibility for our behaviours, our actions, and our patterns. And so you should have a piece of paper now with 3 columns: psychological, emotional, and life patterns. And what I'd like you to do now is just get real with yourself and just write as many, maybe 3 or 10 things in each column that you think you repeat. So if it's a fault, let me just give you an example. If it's a fault, it could be I'm stupid. That could be a fault. That's a pattern. And I repeat that over and over again. It's something that I'm used to over and over again. The emotional one, it could be that I feel lonely. And I'm always telling myself I'm lonely, or other people. Or it could be a life pattern. It is like I'm meeting the same person in relationships over and over again. So write 3 to 10 things in each column. So 3 to 10 faults that you think you could repeat, 3 patterns, 3 to 10 emotions that maybe you experience, or 3 to 10 life patterns. And the life patterns might be repeated once a year or every 10 years. And you're just you're working it out. Maybe you're not aware of this stuff as well. So maybe you do need to just kind of sit there for a moment and think about it. Some of these patterns that we're unaware of are probably the hardest ones to break because we don't even realise. We just kind of repeat them, literally repeat them. So everybody in the studio right now has got their head down and they're writing their patterns out. So I really hope you are listening at home and you're doing exactly the same thing. If these guys are going through it, you're going through it. Okay, so now we're back. So hopefully you've got 3 columns and you've got just a few patterns in each side, in each column. So thoughts, feelings, and life patterns. And just to let you know that this isn't going to change overnight. That the whole point of this week, meditation and yoga, is to become more aware, become more conscious, so we can start zooming out and start looking at the patterns, start becoming aware of the thoughts and the emotions. And like I always say, chances are in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you'll still be repeating patterns, you'll still be emotional, and you'll still have thoughts, because that's being human. But they get lighter, and we can let go of the ones that are not serving us a purpose and create new patterns which can really help us smash it, literally have an epic life. However, the stuff that you just wrote down right now, how do you feel if I told you it's just an illusion, none of it's real? Including you at home as well, the thoughts, the feelings, and the patterns. If it doesn't matter, it's not real. Just wasted all that time, Deb. really focused on that one that you wrote down. So what do I mean by that? The best example is to give you I'm always using drug addicts. The best example is to use as a drug addict. When I was younger and I used to work in the drug and alcohol drop-in centre, people used to come to me with like severe drug problems. I'm talking like heroin, like crack, like bottles of drink every single day. I never really spoke about drugs or alcohol. There was no point. In my mind, and the way I kind of saw it, is that they never really had a problem with drugs, alcohol. Obviously, the brain become addicted to it. The chemicals inside the brain started to need that pattern, and it was getting the feelings. But there was something deeper underneath that. There was like a need. And I always called it a hole in the soul. It's like when somebody's searching outside externally for like love or something else. So in my mind, the drugs and the alcohol were never the problem. They were the surface problem. Back to that iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. And so most people always focused on that. We're trying to cut people down off of drugs. We're trying to implement a plan. And if you look at the drug and alcohol industry, people just keep relapsing over and over and over again. And it's places like AA and NA, which are outside of the system, where people find recovery. And I know people that have been into rehabs like 5 or 6 times. And all that does sometimes is just reinforces the person, that they think that they're a failure, that they can't do it. And I believe it's because most people are just focusing on the drugs and the alcohol. And really, nobody's really going to die from giving up heroin. The only drug that you can die from is alcohol, because you have fits and convulsions. Any other drug, you can do a cold turkey. So that's really pointed out to me and showed me that the drug was just an illusion, because people can just stop straight away. If they're strong enough, if they've got in the right environment, if they go off maybe, whatever the situation has to be. So I was always focused on what's underneath the iceberg. What is it? Was the person abused when they was a kid and there was a trauma? Was the person feeling like negative, low self-worth, that they hated themselves, self-hatred? Most people really didn't like themselves. And so I always focused on trying to help them, give them what they need, if that makes sense. So we focused on their needs. And so I know none of us are drug addicts. I hope none of us are drug addicts. But we're just going back to the list. Look at your list and ask yourself, underneath each one, what's deeper? So if you say to yourself, I'm lonely, I'm just going to use that as an example, and underneath that, I would guess and suggest that there's a lack of love somewhere. Maybe a lack of self-love, self-connection, self-care, whatever it is. I'm just using that as an example. And if you try and find a relationship while you're lonely, you're not really going to find the relationship that you want. You want to fill yourself up from within first. I know it's such a cliche, but it's so true. Again, if it's in the psychological column and we're in the thoughts column and the pattern is I'm stupid or I'm clumsy and I'm thinking that over and over and over and over again, then deeper, so that's the illusion and that's the fault, the story that you tell yourself, deeper underneath that, the need that needs to be fulfilled is that that person thinks that they haven't got any confidence. So they lack self-confidence. So they'd need to work on their confidence. Does that make sense, everyone? And so if it's an emotional one, so does anybody want to shout out one for their emotions and we can just dig into it, see if we can just go a little bit deeper? We won't bring it. Go for it, Jane. Amazing. So again, it isn't going to change like now, but what we're trying to do is just shake the brain up out of the pattern that you're in. Literally, you just hit the nail on the head, get you to think about it a little bit differently, to go deeper. So if I was working with you, say we was coaching or something, I would say, well, let's just work on trust that it's going to work out. Or let's just work on something else, to go back to that little girl and just see what she needs. You know, what did that little girl need? Maybe she just needed reassurance. She needed love. She needed a trust.
That's what it was, really.
Totally.
So, a lot of us, your parents don't show you a lot of love, do they?
Yeah.
It's all functional.
Yeah.
Children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah, and it's hard, and especially old school parents as well. It's hard for them to show that affection and that love. Maybe they never had it, so it's difficult to give it, or maybe they're just caught up in their own stories, and they're going round. So just from Jane, thank you so mumuch for sharing that example, and I hope. Shall I cut that out of the video? Is it okay to share that on the video? It's entirely up to you. Okay, so Jane was basically just talking about a house. So we started off talking about a house and making sure there's enough money to pay for things, and then within a few moments we got down to there was a little girl talking about her grandma, talking about love. And so that's just a brilliant example. And we could obviously go a lot deeper in that. We could find out a bit more about that need that needs to be met. And then we could use some different tools like meditation, self-love, you know, whatever it is, all these different tools, these amazing tools that we got to help Jane meet that need a bit more. And the more she fills that need up, the more that need is felt there, the worry about the house and the other stuff will start to disappear. Obviously, you're still going to have thoughts about buying a bloody house because it's a big move, literally. But it won't be maybe as a pattern that you're going through. Because I'm sure, or I'm guessing, that sort of story that you tell yourself about the house, do you say it about other areas of your life? Like, do you analyse other areas of your life? It's not just the house. Yeah. So that little girl's learned a very good coping mechanism, a coping strategy to start to sort of work out life, and which we've all done. You know, for me, my coping strategy was to be liked by everybody, to be Jack the lad, to kind of fit in with a group. And so when the peer pressure kicked in, when the trouble kicked in, I kind of went along with it. I mean, I'm not blaming anybody else, but I learnt Brett's little coping strategy. That little Brett wanted to be loved and liked by everybody because maybe he just didn't feel it inside. And then after years of working on myself and loving it, it's like, oh wow, I don't need to be that person no more. You know, I went through years of like exaggerating, lying and telling lies. And then I started to do awareness and I was like, oh my God, you literally just told a complete lie. It wasn't even a fib. It was a lie just so the other person would be like, oh, Brett's cool. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And so I had to work on this authenticity, this truth. And now it's just insane that I was that person. But the coping strategy for the little Brett or for the little Jane or for anybody in this room was where the need needs to get met, if that makes sense. So for me, it was love and self-love. For you, it might be trust. Things are going to be okay. Not everybody's like grandma or situations like grandma. Does that make sense to everybody and everybody at home? YouTube's nodding its head. Boom. Does anybody else want to open up or share? You don't have to. You don't. I think you just completely, thank you for sharing. I think you completely summed up what we was just talking about. You know, so for years, you was probably a pain in the ass. I don't know if you went to prison, you know, he's on drugs. You know, your mum's probably looked up. All this kind of, like I probably put my mum through hell. Well, I did put my mum through hell, not probably. You do all this, but then deep down, all Brendan was looking for was just that love and affection. And so then we see these behaviours, you know, like I say, when I go into prisons and even when you're looking at like people that have done some crazy stuff, like paedophiles, I kind of look, it's like, you can't judge a person for that. You've got to really go down and see what these needs are, what's deeper. And so when people judge other people for what they do and their behaviours, it's just completely wrong. So like we do it for ourselves as well. Do you know what I mean? And so underneath that, there's Brendan just looking for love as this kid. I remember when I did go into a prison, and the first thing when I listened to the guys of what they'd done, somebody's like, you know, completely crazy, and I was just like, the first thing I started doing was judging because I got a daughter. I was like, how can anyone do that? And I just sat down and started thinking, well, actually, it's in their head. It's something going crazy inside their head. So there's one extreme, don't get me wrong. But we can't judge people for their behaviours because underneath each behaviour, underneath each thing that you've wrote down on your list, there is a deeper need that you're looking for. And so all I'm doing to do today for everybody at home as well and for everybody in this room is just to become aware of that. That stuff that we normally do, the things that we normally say, the behaviours that we've normally got, We're trying to meet other needs. Even when we're having conversations, maybe, like we said the other day, we're trying to have conversations and we're trying to butt in. Me and Alan were talking about, I think it was like, we get excited and I'm trying to sort of like, it's not like we're trying to do one up on each other, but it's part of our ego that's kind of like, and I did that and I did that and I did that. And so I've become so hot on it now that I walk off and I'm like, analysing the conversation. Not too much, no, but I kind of like think, okay, where did that come from? And now I'm aware of it. And I think for you, it's like going to be a continuous journey. It's like self-love and self-confidence. It's just something we just work on forever. So you should have a list of the stuff that you wrote down, the thoughts, the feelings, and some life patterns. And hopefully now you've got some either more awareness or some more ideas of what's underneath that, like the need. I am not under the illusion that this is going to change now. I'm still working on patterns. I'm still going through stuff just like anybody else. And I don't think this is just going to change with a little bit of awareness. You'll now have to break that pattern. You'll have to go through certain patterns, for certain behaviours, and in my experience, you'll probably go back to that pattern 100,000 times. When you decided to give up drink or you got off a recovery, Brendan, did it just happen overnight, or was that a kind of process? Took years, same, yeah. And it doesn't matter whether it's a financial pattern, a relationship pattern, a drug pattern. It takes ages because we need to keep building that awareness. We need to keep looking at ourselves. And then it's easy, I know some people that just slip straight back into a pattern and they either go straight back to square one or they go back like 10 times harder. I think that's a great point, which I never really mentioned, but it's like when you look out into the world now, you see more and more people waking up. Again, common sense, people just waking up and they're not repeating negative stuff. They want a bit more from life. They're enjoying this experience. Call that a spiritual awakening or shift, whatever you want to label it. More and more people are waking up from the patterns that have been created from generations, from systems, from parents. If Lenny, you don't mind me sharing, like Lenny's dad has never been on holiday. He's never been abroad. He's never been on a plane, has he? So Lenny's here breaking a pattern. He's like, I can either not ever go abroad, never go on a plane. And he's like, boom, I'm getting a ticket. I've never been nowhere. I'm going to Thailand. I'm going to burn my legs. Do you know what I mean? And here he is, burnt legs. But on a serious note, you've broken a massive pattern, Lenny. Your old man would love to be out here, I bet. If he got in it, Les would love it. He probably wouldn't be doing the yoga, would he? But, he's a really lovely guy, his dad. And he's like, he's missed out on travelling. And maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe that's just not his cup of tea. But Lenny's kind of sort of woken up. His mates are at home, playing a computer, smoking a bit too much weed. And he's like, I want to get out. I don't know where that's come from within Lenny, but he's broke a pattern which could be for generations. My dad was a racist football hooligan, and I was just like a mini-me of my father growing up. And then I kind of woke up and started to break those patterns, and you feel so free. So I think that point that you've just made there, it's impossible to get out of the patterns from your parents, like your traits or the behaviours from your mum and dad, but then it isn't impossible to break them and just look at them and just... And it's no fault. We're not blaming anybody, but it's just good to look at them and go, okay, right, I want to be my own person. I want to travel, whatever it is that comes up. So yeah, so if you're listening at home, that's the exercise. And you can do this over and over and over again. I'm still doing it. I don't write the lists down now. I'm just becoming aware of my patterns and how I speak, how I act, how I behave, the people I meet, the relationships I'm in. I'm just kind of aware of it. So once you become aware of it, it's like you can't get rid of it. It's like you start to, as Jane said, maybe not overanalyze it too much, but you kind of, Dalai Lama said that was the best thing to do. You go to bed every night and you just look at your day, you reflect on the day, probably not analyze, but you reflect on your day. How did you treat the person sweeping up the stairs as you walk past them? Did you smile? How did you treat your mum when did you have time for them? How did you treat your friend? And you just close your eyes and you focus on all the good things that you did. And then he says, on all the things that you feel like you could have done a little bit better, he just says, tell yourself you'll do it tomorrow with love and kindness. Because most people go to bed beating themselves up, wishing they never did this, wishing they never said that. And they got it the wrong way around. So it's just a brain hack to switch it around and go, okay, you did 10 amazing things today, and then there's a couple of little things that you could probably do better next time, and then you close your eyes and you go to sleep, and then you do it over and over again. So I think it's really good to have this introspection on your patterns, because that's how you're going to break your patterns and smash them. My name's Brett Moran. Have an amazing day. Thumb out, finger down. We're going to do loads of yoga. Everybody here's got a thumb out, finger. You have to come in. Everybody come in and put a thumb out, finger down, because they might think that I'm actually on my own talking. So come out, thumb out, finger down. Pow. Amazing. Your dad could be watching it, yeah. Pow. Pow.